Hey, Captain Matt, Motor Secret Weapon, with the problem with outboards. Now, I know there's a lot of people that love outboards, but hey, they are not perfect. Let's talk about them, and we're going to break them in. These are the main manufacturers. You got Mercury, Yamaha, Honda, Evinrude that's no longer producing, Suzuki, Johnson, Tohatsu, Nissan. A couple of those aren't making boats anymore, aren't making motors anymore. But this is brought to you by the Boater Bootcamp. You can get it totally free at boaterbootcamp.com. 3 videos, boating basics, navigation rules of boating, and avoiding emergency situations and safety. Very valuable if you're newer to the boating world. So we talked about that some of them aren't making them anymore. Evinrude was shut down in 2020. Johnson obviously was shut down a while back, and Nissan as well. Mercury, Yamaha, Honda, Suzuki, and Tohatsu all currently making outboards. Real quick on the Evinrudes, not only do you have the Evinrude G2, which was shut down by BRP, what BRP decided to do was take the Evinrude G2 technology and put it into the new Rotax outboard. I would stay away from both of these motors if I was you. One, getting parts for them on the Evinrude G2 is going to be very difficult. As I talk to Evinrude manufacturers or Evinrude service shops, their parts are getting harder and harder to come by. The Rotax, I think, is just a disaster waiting to happen, and I have a feeling they're going to shutter that within the next year or two, maybe 3, because just nobody wants it, and nobody wants to work on it. So just real quick on that. So we'll go back to two-strokes. When you talk about the problem with outboard, I think you've got to separate them. So you've got the Optimax, you've got the Evinrude E-Tex, you've got the Yamaha two-stroke as well. A few things that these motors did different is, one, is because of the two-stroke, the oil and the gas mix to lubricate instead of having engine oil to change, right? So in the older models, especially, if you got it a little bit too rich, they smoked a ton. Even the newest ones still can smoke a little bit, even with the high technology that got into it, in the 2000, 2003, 4, 5, before things switched over to the 4-strokes. The other thing is spark plugs. I remember on our old 2-stroke is, hey, Dad always had a set of spark plugs on the boat in the glove box because sometimes you just got too rich and you foul the plug. Something would happen. You mixed it too rich. It pumped it in too much from the reservoir, and you would go through plugs at times. The next is you got to mix the oil, especially on the older ones. Then they came out with a reservoir that would just feed it into the system. Well, that was very good when it worked, but if it malfunctioned, if that reservoir malfunctioned, guess what? Now you're running with no oil, and it can be very, very, very problematic. So a couple of issues there. The big issue with the 2-strokes is the EPA came in and said, listen, they pollute too much. With the 2-stroke, they don't burn all of that oil 100%. So you had a lot of pollution. Now, the G2, one of the better ones, but still there was some issues there. Even the Optimax and the Yamaha, especially the older models, very high level of pollution relative to the 4-stroke. And so that's why you saw them really disappear. The other is, hey, they take up a good portion of the swim platform and they make it less usable. You can see on that Cobalt how everybody's just sort of hanging on the back. That's what happens when you're a lake boater. You go to the sandbar, you go to anchor out. That's where, when I'm on a lake, that's where we spend a majority of the time. And it's one of the major problems with outboards. It's why Rotax tried to come up with their outboard that's submerged. I just think they forgot that water gets in everything at some point, and that's a problem. The next is, hey, there is problems with theft of outboard motors. Now, if you're talking a 9.9, a 25, even a 50, they're pretty easy. You cut the cables, you undo a couple of boats, and boom, you're out of there. But there's even rings that were going around, if you Google it, going around Florida, going around major boating markets, and they actually had big trucks with lifts, and they were taking bigger horsepower outboards. So something to be aware of that that's out there with outboards. And next is, hey, they're a lot more sensitive because as the technology has improved to meet the EPA requirements, to go with the 4 strokes, to go with the digitization of everything, and to be more efficient, well, they're very sensitive to having really good fuel, preferably 100% gasoline. The ethanol over time, if you're running a boat that's not run consistently and you run a tank of fuel that lasts months, that causes problems. So I always recommend 100% gasoline. Follow the octane rating based on the motor that you have. I know Mercury's run 87. Some of the, like the SHO, I think calls for higher grade, Rec 90, I think. But that's something that's having good fuel in an outboard is critical. Fuel water separators, checking your fuel filters, and keeping those in good, clean condition is very, very important, especially for the outboards. You also have, because of the size and the constraint, you don't have as much juice being generated via the alternator or the system that's going to recharge the battery. So when you compare it to a stern drive, the stern drives tend to have 20, 30, 40% more output to recharge the battery, which means that if you're running a lot of electronics, a lot of lighting, that you may have to have extra batteries on the boat, and maybe even a separate cranking battery, so you don't run those too low. They've gotten better over the years. They've been able to draw more with less space, but it's an issue that it's not as big as what you can get when you're talking about a big 4.3 V6 or a V8. Hey, share your experience. What have I missed? What did I get wrong? What have you owned, year, make, and model? And what's been your experience with your outboards? Like I said, you can get the Boater Bootcamp for free. If you're newer to boating and you struggle docking, you struggle handling your boat, and you want total boat control, go check out the Best Boat Captain, bestboatcaptain.com. Give this a thumbs up if you found it valuable. And remember, life truly is better on a boat.